It never crossed my mind at 35 that my father's careful estate arrangements would end up tearing our family apart. To give you the full context, I need to go back to the start. I work as a principal software engineer at one of the major tech companies in Seattle. My dad always pictured me in a career like this. Technology is where the world is heading, he would say with pride when I got into the University of Washington's computer science department. He ran a successful construction company and wasn't a tech person himself, but he had an incredible ability to spot emerging patterns. Dad launched his construction firm from nothing during some of the toughest times in the industry, starting right around the late 1980s recession. With just a pickup truck and his toolbox, he accepted jobs that other builders avoided. Mom told me they lived in a tiny apartment back then, saving every penny, but Dad never lost confidence in his plan. He often said, "The secret is to create lasting connections, not just structures." That philosophy carried him through the lean years. What set Dad's company apart was how he treated clients and workers alike. He believed in transparent pricing and realistic timelines, even if it meant losing contracts to competitors who overpromised. Build trust first, he always advised. The money will come later. He was proven right. By the mid-1990s, his firm had become well known across Seattle for handling complex restoration work that demanded both engineering skill and respect for historical details. Thanks to the loyalty he had earned from clients and employees, Dad's business weathered the 2008 financial crash when many construction firms collapsed. He never laid off a single worker during that crisis. Instead, he cut his own salary to nothing and took out a second loan on his beloved Mustang. Watching him navigate that period taught me more about true leadership than any corporate training ever could. "Your team is like family," he told me. "Look after them, and they'll look after the company." I didn't fully appreciate then how deeply his management style shaped my own professional path. When I moved into leadership roles at my tech company, I applied many of his principles. I created detailed documentation standards for our codebase, just as he kept meticulous records for every job site. His emphasis on strong relationships helped me guide my engineering teams through tight deadlines and high-pressure releases. I met Emily, now 34, at a university hackathon during my junior year. She was studying business administration and helped organize the event. Somehow, despite my sleep-deprived state, caffeine overload, and probably disheveled look, she found my passion for programming endearing. From the moment he met her, Dad adored Emily. After their first dinner together, he told me, "She keeps you balanced. Don't ever let her go." After graduation, Dad even helped Emily start her own marketing consultancy. He connected her with his network of local business owners, shared his contract templates, and walked her through his approach to planning. He always said, "Real success comes from lifting others up along with you." Dad loved sharing knowledge and mentoring anyone willing to learn. Those early years together were special. Emily and I made it a tradition to drive over to my parents' place every Sunday for family dinner. Dad would fire up the grill and we'd all gather on the back deck he had built himself, talking about life while the food cooked. Even though he didn't grasp most of the technical specifics of my latest projects, he still asked thoughtful questions. Mom would laugh and say, "There they go again with all that tech talk," while rolling her eyes affectionately. The house itself was Dad's greatest source of pride. He bought it with earnings from his first major restoration contract in the 1990s, the project that truly put his company on the map. Located in one of Seattle's established neighborhoods, it was a beautiful craftsman-style home with a wide porch and a detached garage that he turned into the most meticulously organized workshop imaginable. Every tool had its labeled spot, arranged with near-obsessive care. Dad treated the house like a showcase of his craftsmanship. Every upgrade was planned and documented thoroughly. He kept detailed records of every repair, improvement, and even paint batch in a comprehensive spreadsheet. "A home is a living organism," he would explain while showing me how to clear gutters or check the foundation. He followed a strict maintenance schedule, inspecting the roof after storms, replacing filters on time, everything. Ignore the small issues, and they turn into major headaches. The workshop wasn't just a storage space. It was his teaching ground. He had fully remodeled the garage himself, adding custom shelving and a workbench designed specifically for passing skills to me. "Every piece of timber has its own history," he would say as we worked together. The pegboard outlines for each tool weren't only about tidiness. They were his way of showing me that everything has its proper role. Our job is to help reveal that history. Weekends were sacred in our family. Dad and I spent countless hours in that garage restoring his 1967 Mustang. He bought it when I was 12, saying it would be our father-son bonding project. That car became a classroom for life lessons. His guidance was direct and practical. Always choose the correct tool for the task. Or, shortcuts seem appealing, but they cost more later. Dad could have finished the Mustang in a single year if he wanted, but he stretched it over 3. He cared more about the journey than the destination. I learned project planning, basic mechanics, and patience from him. We photographed every part we replaced, logged every step, and tracked progress carefully. This isn't only about repairing a car, he would say. It's about learning to divide large challenges into smaller, solvable parts. That mindset has served me incredibly well in software development. After Emily and I married, we bought a modest house about 20 minutes from my parents. Dad helped with the down payment but insisted the mortgage stay in our names only. You need to establish your own financial independence, he explained. It's about standing on your own. He spent weekends with us on renovations, teaching me how to hang ceiling fans and patch drywall. Even then, he was preparing me for full homeownership. My career was accelerating around that time. I'd just been promoted to engineering manager, leading a team building cloud platforms. I loved the work, despite the long hours and intense pressure. Dad would often call during my lunch break just to check in, never needing anything specific. He understood the weight of leading people. Remember to delegate, he'd remind me. No one builds a house single-handedly. We were starting to talk about having kids when Dad first mentioned feeling unusually tired. Mom urged him to see a doctor, but he brushed it off. Just pushing too hard. He'd said he was in the middle of his biggest contract ever, a multi-million-dollar development that would have secured his company's future for a decade. Looking back, I wish I had pushed harder for those medical checks. Maybe the outcome would have been different. The company was growing fast. Dad had opened a second location in Portland and was expanding into more historic preservation work across the region. He had built a reputation for modernizing old buildings while protecting their original charm. It's about honoring the past while preparing for tomorrow, he told clients. That balance influenced everything he did. Our last real conversation was about the Mustang. He was excited to finally enter it in shows now that restoration was complete. We should sign up for the Pacific Northwest Classic, he said, eyes sparkling. Show the kids what a proper muscle car sounds like. He kept planning ahead right to the end. It started like any normal day until everything shattered. My phone rang during an early morning meeting. We were deep into a critical discussion, so I almost ignored it. Something made me step out. Mom could barely speak through her sobs. Dad had collapsed at a job site. By the time I reached the hospital, he was gone. The doctors said it was a massive heart attack, sudden and unstoppable. He was only 58. The weeks after Dad's death blurred into grief and paperwork. The funeral was packed. Dad had touched so many lives through his business and community work. Suppliers, subcontractors, even competitors attended to pay respects. Everyone had a story about how Dad had helped them, offered guidance, or simply listened when they needed it. One veteran craftsman told me how Dad kept him on payroll during a long illness when he couldn't work. Your father knew business was about people first, he said. The employees were devastated. Many had been with Dad for decades. They shared stories I'd never heard. How he covered college books for one foreman's daughter, supported another through a difficult divorce, or stayed late to train young apprentices in preservation techniques. The office conference room became an impromptu memorial filled with photos and handwritten notes from clients and staff. We were all amazed at how thoroughly Dad had prepared for the unexpected. A week after the funeral, his lawyer, Mr. Anderson, called us in. He pulled out a large accordion folder labeled Family Protection Plan in Dad's neat handwriting. Inside were dozens of organized documents with detailed instructions for every aspect of his estate. Mr. Anderson spent 3 days walking me through it all. Each color-coded section contained legal papers plus personal letters explaining Dad's reasoning. In 35 years of practice, I've never seen planning this comprehensive, Mr. Anderson said. Dad had even created a 5-year succession roadmap for the business with contingency options. Afterward, Mom started attending a grief support group at her church. That's where she met Steve, 58. At first, she only mentioned him casually. Steve recommended this helpful book on healing. Or, Steve says these feelings are normal. He was a group leader who had lost his wife to cancer 2 years earlier. Felt soon, but I was glad she had support. Emily reminded me that everyone processes loss differently. The church group met every Tuesday. Soon Mom was joining Steve for other church events. Coffee after service turned into lunches, then dinners. Family friends began expressing concern about the speed of their relationship. At a gathering, my Aunt Jane pulled me aside, worried Mom was rushing to fill the void Dad left. The changes in Mom became noticeable. New hairstyle, different wardrobe, even removing the garden Dad had helped her plant. Whenever I asked, she said, "It's time for a new chapter." The woman who once spent hours sharing memories of life with Dad rarely mentioned him anymore. Things moved faster than any of us expected. 6 months after Dad passed, Mom announced Steve was moving in. She said having James, 30, and Lisa, 32, Steve's adult children, around would bring energy back to the house. I tried to be understanding, but it felt like she was racing to erase everything Dad built. I'm at a difficult crossroads now. How do I protect Dad's memory without standing in the way of Mom's happiness? Emily suggests finding middle ground, but I keep thinking about Dad's letter. "Son, hold on to those memories. First update. Sorry for the delay, and thank you for all the previous advice. 3 months have passed, and the situation has worsened significantly. Steve's controlling attitude used to annoy me, but now he behaves as if he owns the house Dad left to me. Last month, without asking, Steve started a major renovation. When I visited one weekend, contractors were demolishing the custom built-in bookshelves Dad had crafted for the living room. Steve stood supervising, telling them to toss all the old wood into the dumpster. Those shelves were the last project Dad and I completed together before he got sick. They meant everything. When I confronted him, Steve responded with irritation. "Look, kid," he said patronizingly, "this place needs modernizing. Your dad's style was outdated. We're actually helping you by raising the value." I reminded him that legally, any changes required my approval. Mom sided with him and he just smirked. "Your mother and I live here. We don't need permission to improve our home. Steve knows about this stuff," Mom added. "He's only trying to help." The woman who once cherished those shelves and displayed her antique teacup collection on them at holidays now acted like they were just clutter. I showed her Dad's detailed home maintenance records, but she dismissed them as living in the past. The dynamic with Steve's kids has also soured. James has claimed Dad's workshop and turned it into his personal gym. While I was away on business, he held a yard sale and sold most of Dad's tools. Lisa is redecorating rooms and replacing Dad's carefully restored hardwood floors with cheap vinyl planks, treating the house like her design playground. One evening after dinner, Steve pulled me aside. "Since we're investing so much here, we should have our names on the title. It's only right." I had to explain that they pay nothing, no mortgage, Dad paid it off, no rent. I cover all taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Emily suggested we stop weekly visits. With our daughter Emma now here, she's right. No one benefits from the tension. But stepping back has only emboldened Steve. He started sending me invoices for unapproved renovations. Mom's sister called recently, saying I should be more understanding of Mom's new life. I tried explaining Dad's wishes and my legal responsibility, but she accused me of being stuck in grief. "Steve makes her happy. Why can't you let them make the house theirs?" This week I discovered they had removed the growth marks from the kitchen door frame, my height measurements from age 3 to 18 that Dad recorded each birthday. When I asked Mom about it, she said, "It's just an old door. We can't save every scrap of wood your father touched." I now spend evenings in Dad's old armchair, the only piece I managed to save, in my own garage. Mr. Anderson advises considering permanent solutions. Legally the house is mine, but hard decisions are coming. When does protecting a legacy outweigh avoiding being seen as the bad guy? How do you hold the moral line when everyone close to you opposes it? Update 2. Thank you again for the support after my last post. Things have reached a crisis point, and I've made a decision that will likely change everything. Last week I consulted my financial planner about the property. With area values up 40% in 3 years, renting it could generate substantial income, enough to fund Emma's future education. During that meeting I realized I'd been so focused on emotional aspects that I'd ignored the financial burden of letting Mom and Steve live there free. When I raised this during our weekly call, Mom exploded. "You can't do this to us. she shouted. "This is our home. Steve has put so much work into it." She refused to hear my explanation, only listing their improvements, while ignoring that I never authorized them. An hour later Steve called, sounding shaken rather than smug. "We've built a life here," he said. "You can't destroy it just because you miss your dad." When I tried explaining the finances, he interrupted, claiming they had sweat equity. I reminded him the house is legally mine. Dad had reasons for structuring it that way. "Your father isn't here," he snapped. "Think about the people who are." After discussing with Emily and Mr. Anderson, I made my choice the next day. When I arrived, Mom and Steve were starting yet another project, tearing out the original crown molding Dad had custom milled to match the home's era. Seeing that strengthened my resolve, I told them they had 2 weeks to find new housing. Mom immediately broke down, calling me heartless. Steve argued, trying to intimidate me about throwing them onto the street. He listed their community ties, jobs, church, friends, drawing on Dad's lessons about staying calm under pressure. I stood firm. "This is my property. Dad left it to me for specific reasons, and I'm exercising my rights as owner." Steve's face reddened as he rattled off money spent on changes. I pointed out those alterations actually reduced the home's historical value. When Lisa came home and joined in, things escalated. Mom quickly used Lisa's pregnancy for leverage. "How can you do this to your stepsister? She's going to have a baby." I had to clarify that Lisa's situation, while important to them, doesn't affect my property rights, and she's not my stepsister. Since then, there's been nonstop emotional pressure. Mom's entire side of the family has united against me. Her sister called crying, saying their parents are worried about Mom's safety. Steve's brother, a realtor, left messages about the tough housing market. Even distant cousins I barely know send long texts about Christian values and family duty. The hardest are old family friends who've known me forever now expressing disappointment. Every conversation feels like another small betrayal. Some say I'm tarnishing Dad's reputation in the community. But this isn't about greed or cruelty. It's about respecting Dad's intentions and protecting what he built. I've covered all their living costs, let them stay rent-free for years, and tolerated unauthorized destruction of his work. There's a limit. They have 2 weeks to arrange alternatives. I'm not extending despite Mom's pleas. Mr. Anderson confirms the law is completely on my side and that I've been extraordinarily generous. He's preparing formal eviction paperwork, documenting everything properly. I know this paints me as the villain in their story, but sometimes doing what's right means accepting that role, even when it isolates you. Dad taught me that too. Third update. Thank you all for the continued support during this painful time. We've reached the final chapter, so this will probably be my last post. I gave Mom and Steve a 2-week deadline, and it has now expired. These past weeks have been exhausting. Constant guilt trips, emotional manipulation, and desperate attempts to make me back down. Mom called daily, alternating between rage and tears. One day, "I changed your diapers." The next, "I sacrificed everything for you." Steve shifted tactics, offering to sign a lease and pay rent. But after everything they've done to Dad's house, I couldn't trust any agreement. 3 days before the deadline, I arrived to find a group gathered on the lawn. Mom had organized friends from church, relatives, even some of Dad's old business contacts for what felt like an ambush intervention. For 2 hours I listened to speeches about family duty and moral obligations. Mom's pastor spoke on honoring parents. Dad's former secretary teared up recalling his kindness. Even my old elementary teacher showed up to remind me of the values Dad tried to instill. The most difficult moment was Lisa standing, hand on her pregnant belly, talking about how stress could harm her baby while church women glared at me and Mom sobbed beside her. It was masterfully manipulative. Yet something unexpected happened during that gathering. As I listened to people, many who barely attended Dad's funeral, claimed to know what he would want, a calm settled over me. Dad always said, "Stand firm when you know you're in the right." I could almost hear him. I stood and addressed everyone. I explained how Dad planned everything to secure his family's future, and how he personally crafted so much in that home. I showed photos of the damage from Steve's unauthorized changes, historic details ruined, quality craftsmanship replaced with cheap materials. Then I read aloud from Dad's letter explaining why he left the house to me, emphasizing trust, responsibility, and preserving his legacy. Some of the older business associates nodded. They truly understood Dad. Soon afterward, the crowd dispersed. A few still looked disapproving, but the self-righteous energy faded. Some quietly apologized as they left. Mom and Steve went inside without a word. On the deadline morning, I arrived with Mr. Anderson and a locksmith. I had security on standby just in case, though it wasn't needed. The house was empty. Their remaining belongings were loaded into Steve's truck. As he helped Lisa into the cab, Steve couldn't resist one last jab. Happy now? Your father would be so proud of how you've treated your mother. I stayed silent. Dad would understand. Why else would he have been so deliberate in his will? After they drove away, I walked through the house that I hadn't realized how extensive the destruction was. Original fixtures replaced with low-quality substitutes. Dad's handiwork painted over or removed. The workshop, where we spent so many weekends, was unrecognizable. I'm not pursuing damages, but Mr. Anderson photographed everything for records. I just want to move forward and restore what I can. I've already reached out to some of Dad's old craftsman contacts. They're eager to help rebuild removed features. For now, Mom is staying with her sister. Most relatives have cut contact, though a few occasionally call to scold me. Steve's kids keep posting dramatic updates online about their poor mother being evicted, but engagement is dropping. Through everything, Emily has been my rock. When doubt creeps in, she reminds me of Dad's letter and his confidence in my judgment. One day, I'll share stories of her grandfather with Emma and the legacy he tried to protect. She's too young to understand now. I'm working with a preservation expert to return the house to its original character. Some losses are permanent, but we can recapture the essence of what Dad created. Starting with the workshop, the place I learned from him is where I want my daughter to learn too. Sometimes being the antagonist in someone else's narrative is the cost of doing what's right. I may never repair the broken relationships, but I can live knowing I honored what my father entrusted to me. As Dad used to say, integrity means choosing the hard path when it's the correct one, not the comfortable one. I believe he would understand. This will be my final update. Thank you all for following along.